Organisation to the showers, so they're coming through in lines, an hour or so of rain and gusty winds as the showers come through. Now, during the evening, the showers will become increasingly restricted to the south and the west, with a greater chance of drier interludes in the east, although there could still be 1 or 2 showers at times here. Temperatures in most places staying at around 8 to 11 Celsius, but in some sheltered spots, for example, northern England, northern Scotland, those temperatures dipping to the mid-single figures, where we get the greatest chance of some clear spells. And there will be some brightness first thing Wednesday, some sunshine, especially in the north and the east. Further showers, though, will be appearing, especially in the west, and these showers again will be heavy with gusty winds. But there'll be fewer of them compared with Tuesday, a better chance of some sunshine and lighter winds, but still fairly blustery. Temperatures of 15 Celsius in the south, I think 11 or 12 in the north. A change on the way for later Wednesday, however. The cloud thickens in the west and the northwest in particular. A breeze picks up coming from the southwest, and that will send some outbreaks of rain, mostly light and on and off, but some more persistent and heavy bursts for the north and west of Scotland. A mild night to come on Wednesday night, with temperatures by dawn on Thursday mostly in the double figures, but a lot of cloud around, especially in the west. And again, it's going to be damp over some western hills with some more persistent rain in the northwest of Scotland. But all the while, it's turning drier and brighter in the southeast, and that's the trend for the rest of the week. It's going to turn drier in the southeast, unsettled in the northwest.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs & Co. Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into the things that matter to you. Let me ask you this, do you work in retail? Do you know anyone that does? 9 out of 10 retail workers apparently say that they have been threatened and assaulted recently. Why? What is going on? Are we just losing our temper? Many adults say that they're frustrated at the rising prices of things. And also, by the way, I don't know what shops you go to, but sometimes where I go, it's a case of spot the staff. Where are they? Many companies these days are not adequately staffing their businesses. All of that's fine, but does that make it okay to be abusive? I would say no, but where do you say on that? Also, as well, I want to talk to you about crime generally. I mean, sometimes we cover horrific situations, don't we? Just on this show alone, I think in the last week I can remember talking to you guys about children being tortured and horrific things like that. What is the answer answer though, because when it comes to prison and sentencing, many would think, me included, by the way, lock them up for longer, these kind of people. But apparently longer sentences are not a deterrent. If you ask me though, that's probably because many people think, well, you know what, irrespective of the sentence, I'm not going to get caught anyway, because let's face it, our criminal justice system is in a mess. But what is the answer to all of that? And when it comes to the situation in the Channel, we go around in circles on this frequently, but apparently we've got the answer, everybody. Well, I say we've got the answer, but it almost makes me want to laugh out loud, because this time it's another deal with the French. Is it actually going to work and be effective? Or mightn't we just open that window there and chuck our pound notes out of that, and that would have the same effect? And ID cards, Labour have been busy talking about them. Apparently that's going to help with the migrant crisis. Is it really? I want all of your thoughts on that tonight. But first, let's bring ourselves up to speed with this evening's latest headlines.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. MPs have voted in favour of Labour's motion to maintain the state pension triple lock. The non-binding vote was passed by 218 to 0. It comes amid reports that the Prime Minister is looking to raise state pensions and benefits in line with inflation. Rishi Sunak and his Chancellor Jeremy Hunt are also considering imposing up to £60 billion in tax rises and spending cuts in next week's autumn budget. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth says the Tories are finally following their manifesto pledges.
We're calling on the government to honour the promise that they made. It's a manifesto commitment for the Conservative Party, but it's a promise that Rishi Sunak made less than 6 months ago. And indeed, my opposite number, Mel Stride, he's now the Work and Pensions Secretary, just over a month ago he was saying we should inflation-proof both universal credit and the basic state pension. So we're just holding them to their promise.
Downing Street has described the latest bullying allegations against Sir Gavin Williamson as serious. It follows a report in The Guardian that Sir Gavin told a senior civil servant to slit your throat while he was Defence Secretary. It also claims that on another occasion he told them to jump out of the window. Scrutiny is mounting on the PM after it emerged he appointed the minister to his cabinet despite being aware of a previous allegation. Sir Gavin denies bullying. A coroner says he's seen no evidence that Archie Battersby was taking part in an online blackout challenge. The 12-year-old had his life support withdrawn in August after his parents failed to overturn a High Court ruling allowing doctors to lawfully do so. The senior coroner presiding over a pre-inquest review says his phone contained messages reflecting a very low mood. British immigration officers could be stationed in French control rooms in an effort to stop illegal Channel crossings. In a deal thought to be worth around £80 million, Border Force officers would be able to observe French search operations, both for asylum seekers and people traffickers. Almost 40,000 migrants have arrived in the United Kingdom after crossing the Channel so far this year. Donald Trump has cast his vote in Florida as Americans across the country head to the polls in the midterm elections.
We love you! We love you, man!
The former US president left the polling station accompanied by his wife Melania and the cheers of supporters. Currently, the Democrats control both the House of Representatives and the Senate. President Biden is warning that a Republican victory could weaken the country's democracy. Donald Trump told reporters, hopefully the right thing happens. The RMT union says strikes on London's Underground service will go ahead. It's after last-minute talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Union officials say Transport for London has refused its offer to suspend strike action in exchange for a pause to job cuts. In other industrial action, more than 70,000 university lecturers and staff will walk out for 3 days later this month. The University and College Union announced staff at over 150 universities across the UK will stop work in their dispute over pay, conditions and pensions. The strikes will take place on November 24th, 25th and the 30th and could impact 2.5 million students. Extinction Rebellion co-founder Roger Hallam has been remanded in custody for almost a month. He was arrested along with 7 other people accused of planning to join the Just Stop Oil protests on the M25. They've been charged with conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. Activists have disrupted traffic on England's busiest motorway for the past 2 days. 16 protesters were arrested today and 22 charged for actions yesterday. And the actor Bill Treacher, who played Arthur Fowler in EastEnders, has died aged 92. He was one of the soap's original cast members and appeared from 1985 until 1996. He died late on Saturday night after suffering declining health for some time. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel. Back now to Dewbs & Co.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening and keeping me company here in the studio. We have the panel, leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston, and a new face to Dewbs & Co's Susie Stride, a Labour activist. Good evening to both of you. We do love a new face as well on this show, and you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us here and our thoughts, it's about you at home as well. What is on your mind tonight? I want to talk to you about quite a lot tonight. Lockdowns, and what happened during them, by the way? People's moods, what happened to that? Because 9 out of 10 retail staff apparently reckon that they've been abused, assaulted. Have we got much angrier as a nation? What do you think is to blame for that? Some are saying, well, it's the extortionate price of food going up, nearly 15%, wondering how on earth people are meant to survive. And also, where do you stand when it comes to criminal justice, in particular, the length of sentences? Personally, I'm all for longer sentences, tougher sentences, but apparently they don't serve as a deterrent. Why? Well, of course, many criminals right now know that there's no way on earth they'll actually get caught because of all of the backlogs and the police distractions and the like. And finally, migrants, the situation in the Channel. Have we finally stumbled upon the answer? More cooperation and another deal with the French. Is that actually going to happen according to Rishi Sunak? Yes, it will. And ID cards, apparently, that's Labour's idea to help the situation there. So I want all of your thoughts on all of those things tonight. You can get in touch the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. And you can tweet me at GBNews. John, you were one of my first emails tonight, pointing out that my poppy is in the wrong place. Well, I've got to be honest with you. I've had to sellotape it to myself tonight because I did not want to put a hole in this dress, which would have run all the way down. So I've sellotaped it on. If it's still there by the end of the show, quite frankly, it's going to be a miracle. We will see how we get on with that. But yes, I do appreciate that the leaf is in the wrong position. I learned the other day it's supposed to be at 11 o'clock. I do try my best, but can't always achieve it. Right, let's talk, shall we, about our top story tonight, retail. Have you ever worked in a shop? Do you work in a shop? By the way, I suspect it's not just shop workers experiencing this, because get this, 9 out of 10 retail workers now say that they've been assaulted. And by assaulted, by the way, I don't just mean called a name. It's things like slapped, spat at, attacked. Really? What on earth is going on in our society? Susie, I'll start with you on this. What do you think is responsible?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of things that are responsible. Number one, obviously, the war in Ukraine and rising fuel prices has meant that cost of products in shops has gone up. So I think, number one, lots of people are just feeling that strain because you go to the shops and unless you're a millionaire or you've got loads of money, you've noticed that the cost of just everyday things has increased. But I also think that, you know, again, if you go to shops these days, there's way more automation, and so you don't get as many staff in shops. There's there's just way less staff in shops, which some of it is, I presume, to do with big companies wanting to cut costs and make more profit. But either way, it just means that when you go into shops, probably those staff members have got a greater amount of strain on them because there's less staff. But also the people going into the shops are feeling anxiety because because cost of products has gone up, and for lots of people, it's not just the cost of products; it's the whole cost of living. It's people struggling to pay their energy bills, and so it's not. Life isn't normal for a lot of people at the moment, and so. Yeah, I mean, but that doesn't make it acceptable. Sorry, just to say, it's not acceptable for anyone to ever assault anyone. I've worked in a shop myself. But I think that's maybe why there is this added strain on people. I think the other thing is, and I know we're going to talk about police later, but there have been 20,000 cuts to police in this country, and we know that police are working under very difficult circumstances, which means that, I mean, I would expect there are so many people that call the police and aren't actually seeing the police being able to come.
You hit on a good point, and I'm coming to that, as you quite rightly say, in my second part of my programme. William, bringing it back to this whole kind of retail thing, the way that people are acting right now, what do you think is going on?
I think there are probably two sort of causes. There's a very, very long-term cause, which is, I think, if you take 30 or 40-year view, I think civility has decreased. I think we're a less harmonious society than we were. I think that's not a good thing. So that's the sort of long-term thing. I think, obviously, at the moment, we're probably facing, well, we've had the pandemic, and during the pandemic, actually, there was a little bit of, you just see it on the road, odd driving behaviour, people were stressed, so you see that. I think the Retail Trust survey referred to this as a sort of intolerance or an anger epidemic. And I can see that's true, but, the sad thing is that the people abusing shop workers, we've got to realise that the shop workers don't make the prices. I mean, it's a tragedy. You see it, people buy petrol at the petrol station and are angry with the shop worker. The shop worker's probably on a minimum wage. He's just trying to make their way in life, the same as everyone else is. But I think, I would ask. I don't think it'll necessarily happen, but I think, honestly, just treat people with a bit of respect. Just say thanks, how you going, and cheers. That goes a long way. If you can do that, it costs you nothing at all to do that.
But one of the challenges, I mean, the word of the year, I think it was the Oxford Dictionary, but I might be wrong with which dictionary it was. Yeah. Their word of the year was permacrisis.
Yes.
And actually, if you look back over this last few years, we have lurched from one crisis to another crisis to another crisis, and everything is presented in the way of crises. And it's kind of like you almost forget about one crisis because you've lurched into the other one. And if you pause, you think, hang on a second, what happened to that one? It's kind of so people are in this constant state of whipped up kind of anxiety often. So then No,
it's true. It's true. I mean, people have been through the pandemic, and that weakened society. People, there was a lot of mental health issues came out then. And then you've got three things. You've got the energy crisis, which is putting up people's bills. You've got a food inflation crisis. So, that's one reason. There's a mortgage crisis happening now. About 250,000 mortgages fall due for renewal, and they're getting put onto higher rates, and people can't pay it. One thing I'd take that Susie said, which I think is very important, actually, is an important point. A lot of these environments are quite dehumanised. So you're going into a shop and you're being herded into a self-checkout thing, and again, it's progress in inverted commas, but is it really progress? There isn't a human being there. You're not saying, how are you going? What did you do on the weekend? Well, you're literally herded through, and all of this is a pity, I think.
I think some of these, I used to be a checkout girl, and I suspect that some of the cost savings that these supermarkets make by reducing their staff, the more these prices go up, I think, and obviously I don't condone what I'm about to say, but I think that they'll probably find a situation where people are not perhaps scanning absolutely everything in the way that they ought to with these technologies. So I'll be interested to see what that does to their profit margins. But let's talk, you mentioned about escalating prices and people worried and not being able to afford stuff, etc. Let's bring this to the government response then. Do you think the government is doing enough to help people at the moment?
No.
What do you want them to do?
I mean, I think, look, as we've already said, people are struggling. They're struggling to pay their energy bills. They're struggling to afford to buy basic things in shops. And I think, unfortunately, the Conservatives are just very out of touch with normal people. And so You know, I mean, and also, let's be honest, some of the issues we're seeing in the economy is because of the Conservatives' incompetence, because of some of the decisions that they made, which caused inflation to go up. And I think it was the Governor of the Bank of England said we were hours away from a massive financial crisis. And so, you know, and I think in the past, people have often said, you know, we vote Tory because they're the party of competence. Well, I think the last month has shown us that is not true. And when it comes to, are they helping people? Well, no, they're not helping people. I think they're adding to people's stress. I mean, I know we're not talking about the NHS today, but it's everything, isn't it? It's, you want to get a GP appointment under Labour, you could get that within 24, 48 hours. Now people are waiting a week. That's added stress for people.
Yeah, but hang on a second, because that's a bit disingenuous to make a comparison, because there's been a humongous thing in the between, which has been the pandemic. The reason you've got the NHS waiting list, and this is a tangent, but the reason you've got those waiting lists is because the National Health Service became the National COVID Service, and that led to these backlogs. And actually, the Labour Party, they were a party actually that campaigned for longer, harder lockdowns. They were criticising the government when they were actually having the forward thinking to bring us out of lockdown.
Yeah, and 100%, ultimately, the COVID factor means that the NHS was massively impacted by that. I've got lots of friends that work in the NHS. That's 100% true. However, before the pandemic came, in March 2020, there were already massive issues with the NHS. I've got loads of friends that are doctors, people that went into that sphere because they care about people, wanting to exit it because they can't do their job properly because of the cuts that have come to the NHS. And look, there are some things that we could say just piecemeal and it wouldn't be true. But there is no, if we got 100 doctors in this room now, they would say the issues in the NHS, the cuts to the NHS, people with cancer waiting longer for treatment, people waiting longer for GP appointments, all started way before COVID.
I want to just bring this because we could, I would respond and say, actually, you've had things like winter crises and NHS that's been creaking for decades, but I don't want to take myself too much off topic. So I'll bring you back in, William. Cost of living specifically, do you think this government is doing enough to help people that are struggling?
To be honest, I think all of this goes back about 30 years. I think that the government's borrowing money. There's a massive. The PSBR is the borrowing requirement for this year is about 100 billion. They've got the energy bailouts, which if you'd spent on nuclear power, you could build a whole new nuclear power industry.
I'm talking
about today. Yeah, but whatever they do, if they hurl more money at this, it's off debt. Okay, I'm going to make a more profound point, which is that the real cause of all of this is the sort of liberal economics we've had over 30 years, and it's New Labour and the Tories. They've deindustrialised, they've been indifferent to what is made where and by whom. We've lost our industry. We used to have about a third of the economy used to be manufacturing, now it's 9%. People don't care about it. You can't have an economy based on services. Most big cities and towns in the north of England that used to produce things, used to have an economy based on making things and exporting. Now it's debt everywhere. And now the solution to a new crisis like this, the mortgage crisis, will be more debt.
But if you want more things to be manufactured in this country, which I'm not opposed to, by the way, but you will surely concede that there is a cost to that. One of the reasons, not the primary reason, but one of the reasons that many manufacturing and things, the rest of it, are made overseas in places like China is because we all expect cheaper goods. If you want to bring all that manufacturing back in this country, do you accept that there's a price increase to that?
I do. Yeah, no, I do. I absolutely do. I think if you look at a lot of politics, the fundamental divisions, whether it's Trump or possibly Brexit or any of the other things that we're talking about, the fundamental thing that divides Western societies now is what's called the China shock, the effect of a lot of the West deindustrialising, and you get places like Hartlepool or Middlesbrough now thoroughly deindustrialised, and honestly, the industry's moved out and the drug dealers moved in, and it's a tragedy.
Well, the industry moved out, and what happened was nobody actually spared a thought for if I take these industries out, if I close these mines or whatever it is, if I stop this fishing ports, whatever, what do I put in its place? How do I stimulate economic growth? And that's one of the things that I think is a real tragedy, because you see these hard-working, proud communities that had their industrial heart ripped out without a second's thought for what do we do afterwards, which is ludicrous. Susie, if I come back then to what more should the government do in the here and now today to help people with these rising costs and all the rest of it, 15% pretty much food going up, what do you think more they should do?
Well, one of the things that the Labour Party has said we'd do is a windfall tax on energy companies to provide more support for people, which I think is important. But I think, there's an important point being made here. There's something bigger going on, isn't there, in this country? We're like the 6th, 7th wealthiest country in the world. I think we can do better. And actually, I think part of being proud of being, you know, British, English, whatever you want to call yourself, is that we look after people, but also that we believe that, you know, wherever you're born, that you can fulfil your potential. And so the bigger picture for me is that we are investing in communities. We're investing, and what I'm saying is exactly what you were just saying there. Going back 20, 30 years, you know, the heart of communities was ripped out, and actually ways of people working and earning money, a lot of that was taken away from lots of communities, and there hasn't been really a long-term plan to solve that. So there isn't a short answer. I'm sorry I don't have this short, quick answer, but for me, it is about saying that actually we want to make sure that there are good jobs that pay well. That doesn't mean that a mum and a dad have to work, you know, 2 shifts or whatnot.
Let me give you the devil's advocate to that. If you're saying there's good jobs that pay well on one hand, which I completely agree with, and then on the other hand, what you're saying is tax companies more, don't you worry a little bit that you might de-incentivise some of these companies to set up these well-paid jobs for people if what you're going to do is just add in new taxes whenever landscapes change?
No, because I think, you know, there's a million reasons why companies want to do business in this country. There's many, many reasons. So but you are right. There is always a balancing act there. There's always a balancing act. It's like what happened in France. They started to tax super wealthy people certain amounts and they all left the country, you know. So I think there is a balancing act to be done. But I think there is a mature, wise way of ensuring you keep companies in this country, ensuring you keep companies investing in this country, but making sure those companies are doing their bit. Now, I'll give you a classic example. I'm from the East End of London. I live by Canary Wharf. All of those companies benefited massively from tax-free, you know, land back in the 80s. Great, they came, they regenerated the area. But now, at this point, what should have happened in the last 10 to 15 years is the government should have said, now we're going to ask you that 20% of your local workforce comes from training up local people and giving apprenticeships to local people. Now, what they get out of that is staff that would probably be loyal and stay, and not just stay for 2 years then go off, because they'd be committed. So what I'm saying is there are big things we can do.
How can you dictate to an organisation who it needs to employ based on postcode? This is private enterprise. These aren't nationalised banks. These are individuals, entrepreneurs, setting up their thing. How can you dictate to them, right, Fred, now 20% of your workforce have got to come from that estate?
OK, so the reason why you can do that is that because these companies benefited from taxpayers' money when they got that land back in the 1980s under the LDDC, tax-free. So that was taxpayers' money that gave them that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, hear me, I'm not like a crazy communist. You know, I've got nothing wrong. It's good that people make money. It's good that people invest in areas. But what I'm saying, actually, I mean, I've actually worked in apprenticeships and I've spoken to people high up in Barclays Bank and others, and they even themselves would argue we would do better to employ and train people from this local area because they will stay. They will be loyal to us. And this is what statistics shows. And I agree, I'm not saying you dictate to people, but I think there's also a level of fairness in that. They have benefited from the Isle of Dogs. They have benefited from being in Tower Hamlets, and they haven't given that much back. But actually, they'd probably do better if they did.
William, you want to come in?
There's an interesting point. So I was talking about the fundamentals of the structure of the economy. We've got an economy based on services in the southeast and tossing a few biscuits to her. It's not sustainable. But to take your point on labour market planning and training, I take part of that point entirely. I think we've been completely indifferent to training our own workers. We don't care. You look at whether it's the health service, can't be bothered to train enough doctors or nurses. Why? Do you know what the real reason is? Because the structure of the economy is wrong. We've had an economy that's based on just importing vast amounts of people in. Forget about training our own people. Just import people. It's cheaper and it's lazier to do that, and it's wrong. And the result of that is you end up with 5 million people, British people, on out-of-work benefits, and they're thrown on the scrap heap. But the cause of it is the open labour market. And for those of us who supported Brexit, we were making a case against that labour market. I can't see any incentive whatsoever to train people if you're in a labour market like that. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, can you see the incentives? Tell me. And I want your thoughts, by the way, as well, on a couple of things tonight. Do you think people are getting out of control when it comes to rudeness to staff? Are you someone that is rude to staff? Have you found yourself getting increasingly wound up when you are engaging with other people? And do you think the government is doing enough or not? Give me your thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your thoughts. And I also want to move on to talk about criminal sentences. If you commit a crime, what do you think would be the biggest deterrent to you? Would it be like a long stretch in jail? Would that put you off or not? Apparently, research says no, long sentences are not a deterrent because, quite frankly, people don't think they're going to get caught in the first place. So what's the answer then? Tell me, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. If you just tuned in, you've just missed us talking about basically the cost of living, whether or not it's leading us all to be furious, angry and taking it out on the wrong people. Apparently 9 out of 10 retail workers reckon that they've been abused and assaulted recently. Not acceptable, is it? Carol says. I work in a supermarket, Michelle, and I can tell you there's always a shortage of workers. She's basically saying that companies don't want to have to pay for enough workers. Only at Christmas, she says, when they reckon they'll have a profit gain. She says, I had a teenager come up to me and said he had a knife. That's not good enough, is it? I wonder, by the way, Carol, what does your security staff do in that situation? Do you feel like you can turn to them? Do the security guards get involved? No one should be having to go to work, do they? And be threatened with a knife. It's outrageous. Anyway, I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight, keeping me company in the studio. We've got the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston, and Susie Stride, who is a Labour activist. I want to talk to you about crime, everybody. Because it used to be, didn't it? If you do your crime, you do your time. That's all well and good, but not if you actually don't manage to get caught. Because apparently now, irrespective of the length of potential punishments, it's not a deterrent because people sit there and think, actually, I'm not going to get caught anyway, so why worry myself? Personally, William, I am a fan of longer deterrents and harsher deterrents, actually, prison sentences. I would make prison a really uncomfortable, unpleasant place that people really would do anything to avoid returning to. At the moment, I do not think that is the case. Where do you stand on it?
Broadly where you are, I wouldn't make it unnecessarily uncomfortable, but I think the
You wouldn't make prison unnecessarily uncomfortable?
I think the purpose of prison is to protect the public. So I'm looking at protecting victims here. And the Sentencing Council says that there's a poor relationship between long sentences and criminality. And they've put some quite convincing reasons why that's the case. I mean, one of them is that they say that a lot of criminals have low self-control, which is true, and they're very impulsive, that's true. And also that a lot of the criminals don't know that they might get a slightly longer sentence. But the base fact is that only 5% of these crimes are solved, and that's the basic problem. But I take your point. I mean, I think there is I would argue, a logical flaw, actually, in the Sentencing Council's report. They say that longer sentences don't protect the public. Well, they do while the criminal is in jail, surely. I mean,
yeah, but I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you on this process, on your thought process that actually prison is to protect the public.
Yeah.
To me, prison is to punish the criminal.
It's both. It's both. But I mean, I don't. I mean, I think the prime thing is to protect the public. The prime thing is to keep dangerous people away from society. Yes, of course, it should be a punishment, and being locked up in a cell is a punishment. I wouldn't. I wouldn't bring back, the workhouse or anything. I think there's no. I don't think that serves anything. I don't think that would rehabilitate people. But I am in favour of longer sentences. If you read, there are many cases where people have done very serious things. The sentences are inadequate, and they get early release, which is not acceptable. So you need as much prison space as you have violent and difficult criminals. That's what you need.
Where do you stand on this, Susie?
I think, look, we're seeing less crimes being solved, and I just don't think it's rocket science. I think it's because this Conservative government have cut 20,000 police officers. Again, you can talk to... I've got friends that are police officers. You can talk to police officers and they'll say, like, what has happened... So many police don't want to be policemen anymore because of the conditions of being a police officer. So I think, number one, we need to see investment in police so that they can actually solve crimes. But also, I mean, I've worked with young people. I've worked with young people that are involved in criminal activity. And I do think it's absolutely right that if someone commits a crime, that they go to prison. However, there are lots of things we can be doing in society to prevent people from committing crime, i.e. we used to have way more youth workers. We used to have way more youth clubs. We used to have youth mentors. We used to have way more sport in the community. If you strip back those things, there is going to be an effect. Now, if you're from a more privileged background, which I've got nothing against, because in some ways I'm from a more privileged background, but if you're from a more privileged background, maybe mummy and daddy can pay for you to go to football classes and blah, blah, blah. But if you're not, then let's be honest, these kids are roaming around the streets, they haven't got loads to do, maybe they've got difficult home lives, and I'm not saying it's an excuse, But I'm saying, you read any criminologist report on these things, and there's certain factors that often lead to criminality in young people. And either we say, well, let's just dust our hands of all of them, or we say, actually, the next Alan Sugar could have been one of those kids, but we just decided to leave them on the scrap heap of life and not invest in their lives. So for me, I mean, it's a bigger picture, but I'm happy to say a bigger picture because I believe in a Labour government. And if we had a Labour government, I believe the landscape of this country would look completely different. And as I say, part of it is investing in police, but part of it is investing in preventative measures.
William, you want to come back in?
I partly agree with the point about resources and the number of police, but I only partly do because part of this is to do with the actual... I mean, we've had a habit of this programme of going back in time a little bit. You know, a lot of this is to do with family breakdown and loss of common life. Honestly, those are the core causes. And then the police are having to deal with massive, waves of crime. I'll give you some stats. In the 30s, nationally, there were only 400 street robberies. In London boroughs, the number of street robberies per year can be 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 per year. And you can say, let's have a few more policemen, but that is a weight of crime that they're really struggling to deal with. And so I would say until we are serious, until we start sticking up for the family and social discourse, and also be honest about the real causes, kids that go around stabbing each other are much more likely to not have a father in the house.
I know, but
let's be honest about it. It's not all resources.
Well, can I be honest? I get a little bit tired, actually, of people making very poor choices in their life because, let's face it, if you choose to put a knife down your own pants and go wandering the streets and think that, actually, I am entitled to steal your iPhone, I'm entitled to whip your watch off your hand, I'm entitled to nick your car, they are proactive choices. And unless you are an incredibly stupid person, then you know that is wrong what you're doing. And whilst I'm appreciating what you're both saying, and I think I agree with the sentiment to a degree, why is there not enough focus on these people's choices that they are proactively making?
OK, so it's really funny because I have these debates with my friends all the time, but I am someone that has worked for 20 years with young people in one of the poorest areas in this country, and I've seen both sides of this. You know, I've been a victim of crime before, and it makes me very angry and very upset, and, called the police and nothing has happened, etc. So I understand that, and I'm not saying that we're not tough on crime, as someone once said. Absolutely right to be tough on crime. By the way, as a side factor, the courts are in a mess. Courts in absolute disarray. Talk to any lawyer in this country. Why is that? Again, because our government, this Tory government, hasn't properly invested in courts, hasn't properly invested in legal aid and all these things. So, number one, things aren't properly being dealt with in the courts. Number two, as we've already said, we've got cuts to police. But you're not answering my question at all. I will now answer your question. You're saying about people making poor decisions. Yeah. Fascinating. Yesterday, I was with one of my old young people whose brother is in prison for stabbing someone. So I said to him, OK, what happened? Because I used to work with his little brother, this is, say, 10 years ago. And basically, he was just like, some boys were basically threatening him and saying they were going to stab him. In the end, he had to carry a knife to defend himself. And don't get me wrong, still a silly decision. I would never pull a knife on anyone. I would never carry a knife. But do you know what? I wasn't born in a family where I had no dad, where my mum had a stroke when I was 12 years old, where we had... went to a school where, do you know what, before you even walk through the gate, you know you're going to get crap GCSEs. And then you can't get a job. You get a job, actually, in 2008, and then the economic crisis happens and you lose your job. And then you have very little confidence to get another job. What I'm saying is, we're all sitting here, we all have a job, we all have that security. Certain people live certain lives. And yes, there are always choices. But I think if they've had 50 things already against them, I think it's very difficult for us to sit here and judge them. Now, don't get me wrong.
It's not difficult for me to sit here and judge those people because I had a life not too dissimilar to the ones that you're describing. Yeah. And I made different choices to pretty much every single person that I associated with on the council estate that I used to hang around with. My partner was in and out of prison. My weekends were spent visiting him in and out of prison. I made a decision. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult. I didn't have this privilege. I made a choice, and I just get sick and tired of constant excuses for these people who proactively choose to be wrong-uns.
Yeah,
I do.
But I get that. I think that's fair enough. And you could actually... It's a perfectly respectable position to say, what is the cause of crime? The cause of crime is the criminal's choice to do the crime. You know, that's on one level, on an individual level, that's true. But I think all of this... I would say our society is doing as well as a society could do that's got rid of 4 on 40 wages. You know, in the 60s and 70s, you could raise a family of 4 on 40 hours of an industrial wage. You can't do that now, so the economy's gone wrong. The foundation of society is the family, and we've also, just to throw another thing in, we also lost our religious belief largely. We don't go to church anymore. I'm not a believer, but I'm just making the point that people wonder why all this is happening, and the foundations that used to support our society aren't there anymore. And so we build those literally from the foundations up, we're going to have the same problem.
I don't really need to wind up. I just really need to say I completely respect where you're coming from, because I understand, like you, I was also born on a cancer estate. My mum, you know, came from a very naughty background and was in a gang, but then turned her life around. She's now a church leader. So I agree, it is all about choices. So you are right. I think what I'm trying to say is these things are complex. We do need to have tough sentences. We do need to have more police, but we also need to acknowledge kind of what you're saying.
Honest about the foundations.
Social fabric, things like even investing in sport. This is not a left-wing idea. This is an idea about potential, about the fact that kids are gifted, whether you're from Eton or Poplar. But if you go to Eton, you get, you know, a private school that invests in your life and you get to go to a sports club. If you're born in Poplar, maybe you don't get that, and especially if you're a girl, you know? So what I'm saying is part of being, I would say, proud of living in this country, part of being proud of, like, this country is that we invest in people's lives, whether you're from Poplar or Eton. And that's what's not happening. And I'm saying there's a direct correlation between that and levels of crime.
Well,
but it is not the only answer.
Do you agree? Tell me your thoughts on that. Am I being a bit harsh when I say basically make your choices better? What do you think to the concept of actually if we invest more in youth clubs and activities and all the rest of it, perhaps family units, as William was just saying, does it all boil down to that? Give me your thoughts, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Right, okie dokie, channel crossing as we go around these circles, often apparently, there's been progress, ladies and gentlemen, according to Rishi Sunak. Anyway, he's about to strike a deal with the French. Is this the answer? And also, Labour, by the way, they reckon we should introduce ID cards in this country to help with this situation. I've run a Twitter poll to ask you your thoughts on that, but give me your thoughts and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as membership of Reform UK explodes, is a political revolution imminent? Party leader Richard Tice explains why former Tory members are fleeing the party in their droves. Plus, as America goes to the polls, is the Trump comeback on, and could this be the beginning of the end for Biden? Esteemed US journalist Megyn Kelly breaks down this crunch vote on the future of America, and there's opinion galore from Nigel Farage, Tonya Buxton, and my superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics. and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 with the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston, and Susie Stride, the Labour activist. You guys getting in touch just about this whole kind of assaulting that's happening, the assault on retail staff. Lynn says, Michelle, this is nothing new. Until recently, we owned a flooring company until our retirement, and we were threatened with machetes, knives and physical violence throughout. The verbal abuse was off the scale, she says. It is absolutely nothing to do with present circumstances, Bob says. We had inflation back in the 70s and I don't recall any violence then. When it comes to policing, lots of you, by the way, in favour of longer sentences, many of you agreeing that you do have to entertain, encourage the young people to try and encourage them not to commit crime. Richard, I think you make a fascinating point. You say, bring back national service. The problem in this country is that discipline has gone. I certainly think, actually, there is time for a debate about whether or not you should have some form of national service when you leave education, whether that's military or not, who knows. Certainly a debate to be had, and that's something we will make a note of for a future show. But for now, let's talk about the channel. Apparently, Rishi Sunak reckons he is in, I quote, the final stages of striking a deal with the French to stop migrants crossing the English Channel. That's, by the way, on top of the tens of millions of pounds that we've already paid them. Goodness knows how this deal will apparently be any different. William, do you have high hopes for this new deal with the French?
I'm perfectly happy that they speak to the French, and if they can get some cooperation, I'd be in favour of it, but it won't. I don't think it'll make any difference. When the Rwanda scheme was announced, I was one of the few people that said it was a publicity stunt and it wouldn't work because, you know, they left the legal means in place to challenge their own policy. So I don't think any flights are going to go. It's not very likely. I've always said that the illegal migrants are acting perfectly rationally because they've got a very good chance, if they get here, of staying. The grant rate is very high here compared to other countries. And I think broadly, this is a democratic issue. You know, the people... The question of who arrives here and under what circumstances should be the government, the democratically elected government. At the moment, it's not being decided by the government, it's being decided by criminals. And the fundamental reason for this is that we're still in the protocols. If you stay in the protocols, you can't really have border sovereignty. You've got to choose between...
Yeah, but they know this because they're not daft, Williams. This is one of the things that I can't square the circle of. If they know that they've got these legal restrictions in place that basically means that anything they try and do, they're going to be scuppered, why are they not spending their time, money and effort in getting out of, whether it's the ECHR or what? Why aren't they doing that?
Because they don't want to. I think it's just too much for them to do it, even the Tories. I think the Tories are pretty, well, they're useless on this issue. I think the Labour Party and the Liberal Dems will probably be even worse. I think the reason is that it's just not a high-status opinion or view to want to get this sorted. So if you're going to be embarrassed at a middle-class dinner party in London by saying, I think we should withdraw and get new protocols, which are better, it's not a high-status opinion. You'd be slightly ashamed of saying that, and that's why they don't do it. Honestly, they don't do it because they don't want to do it.
So the Tories, I think we can all concede, Susie, this is a mess at the moment. He says your lot, Labour, will be even worse.
Look, I've got a very different perspective on this whole thing. I've spent the last couple of years working with Iranian refugees, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's changed my perspective on this. I think sometimes I used to watch the news and see these people coming in from the boats and think, what's going on, you know, and whatever. I don't know what I thought, and maybe I don't want to say what I thought, you know, but I understand sometimes where people are coming from. But now I've spent time with these people, and I'm working with about 80 of them at the moment. I'm just going to be honest with you, my heart's completely broken for them. These people come from places in Iran where women and children are being murdered on a weekly basis. I'm sorry to say that, but that's what's going on, just because they're not wearing...
Susie, these people in these boats come from France.
No. Some of these people...
No. Every single person on those boats have come from France.
Yes, they may have come from France, but I'm saying they're coming from different nations, and most people do not risk their lives. One of the guys I know risked his life coming over on a boat where, like, 100% they could have drowned, but he did it. That's how much fear they have. That's how much they're desperate to get out of the nation they're coming from. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there are not things that we need to put in place here, but I personally do not come from... I just don't come from a discompassionate place on this. You know, and I think there's a problem with our right-wing media whereby we want to blame all of our problems on immigration.
Susie.
But the point is if you don't have a government that's investing in the NHS, if you don't have a government that's got a proper national minimum wage, if you don't have these things in place and then you start blaming it on immigration, that is a big... For me, that is a big problem.
Susie, I
totally understand. It can't be that bad, by the way, or else everyone would be desperate to get in these boats and come here as an economic migrant.
I totally understand. If you're working with migrants, you'd feel it. The proximity, obviously, you'd feel it. The point I make is that you've got to look at the protocols because they're not fit for purpose. Let's be honest about it. And the standard of debate on this issue is abysmal, absolutely terrible. Silly little publicity stunts and so on. The number of people that would qualify under the 51 Convention globally are certainly hundreds of millions and possibly billions. Any Democrat in China, a lot of gay people in sub-Saharan African societies, half the Afghan population would qualify. And look, if the private sector, in other words, the smuggling gangs can get you here, you're in, and you've got to admit that's not sustainable. We can't. No. We can't go on like this.
Yeah.
And I would urge the government to just be honest about it to the public.
I've got about 1 minute left. Let me ask you this then. So Labour's latest idea on this is about reintroducing or introducing ID cards. Where do you stand on that?
I mean, again, I'm just with William on this. I just don't think any of these things are going to ultimately be the solution. This is, unfortunately, look, we're talking about, these are global problems. These are global issues. If you reduce aid to countries, if you don't properly, I'm just going to say again, in Iran, there is a revolution going on. People are being brutally murdered.
Yes, but these are not Iranian women and children on these boats.
And then the international community are doing nothing. Our government is doing nothing. If we actually intervened in situations, supported, again, this is women and children fighting for their rights to just wear their hair freely and to be able to go to have
Susie,
education.
This has got nothing to do. Women and children in Iran are not the people that are getting on these boats. These are chances, often from Albania. These two are different things. And by the way, you're saying actually the government did more to intervene in this and that and the other. There'll be a school of thought out there, I know, with my viewers shouting at the screen saying actually it's our government, our countries sticking their nose in affairs absolutely everywhere. That's one of the reasons that's caused
there's a level of sticking your nose in which is obviously not helpful, i.e. what went on in Iraq. That level of intervention is not helpful. But the level of intervention where you're preventing crises or supporting people is different.
Well, there you go. I didn't get a straight answer, by the way, on ID cards, but I did ask you a lot at home. Are you in favour of them? 54% of you said yes, you are. Be careful what you wish for, my friends. That is all I've got time for. Susie, William, thank you for your contributions. Thank you at home for yours. Have yourself a fantastic evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, it's Aidan McKibben here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Showers will continue to rattle on the windows overnight, especially around southern and western coasts. It will stay breezy, but there will be some cloud breaks coming through. The weather highly changeable at the moment, low pressure in charge, that low pressure sitting to the northwest of Scotland, and various occluded fronts moving through on this strong westerly breeze. They're providing a focus for, well, more organised showers, longer spells of rain at times. But through the evening, well, the showers increasingly affecting southern and western coasts, with eastern areas seeing a better chance of drier and clearer intervals, and where we get some clear spells, temperatures into the single figures, and for parts of northern Scotland, with some shelter, seeing temperatures dip to 2 to 5 Celsius. So a bit of a fresh start in some places first thing Wednesday, but for many, well, it's simply another day of sunny spells and showers. A better chance of sunny spells coming through in between the showers because there'll be fewer showers around, and again they'll be affecting western areas more than eastern areas. Temperatures up to 14 or 15 in the south, 11 or 12 in the north, and with less of a gusty wind, it perhaps might feel a bit more pleasant, even if those temperatures are a degree or so down on Tuesdays. Into the evening, though, the clouds will thicken from the northwest, and for parts of northern and western Scotland, there'll be persistent rain coming through at times. Some dampness over western hills elsewhere, but for many it's drying up and it's turning milder, and that's the theme for later this week. We're going to see mostly dry weather for the south and the east, with some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud elsewhere, and that cloud containing some damp weather for the hills of Wales, northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And with a freshening breeze, we'll see some persistent wet weather for western Scotland at times, but that breeze is coming from the southwest, so that's another trend for later this week. It's turning much milder.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.